is Alice, and on today's show of Dimensions of Diversity, we will be having conversations with Amal, Kareem, Hope, and the Muslim Student Association with Dr. Zawya of the graduate school, who is the Dean and Faculty Advisor to the Muslim Student Association. Also, live from the Providence campus, we'll have an interview with Dr. McCrae, who is the Vice Provost for Urban Affairs. Now we're going to move over to Waleed and Brittany, who are going to introduce us to Eric, Amal, and Kareem.
Greetings, Rams. Today, we're being joined by discussion by Eric Betancourt, an exceptionally diverse student who was set to graduate this May. Eric's life experiences have put him through almost everything. He's seen near everything and has certainly been through more than the average college student. Eric lived in the fast lane as a teenager and as a young adult, which landed him a short stint in the act. But when he was released, Eric consciously and assertively decided to take his life in a new direction. The first step was to enroll in classes at the Community College of Rhode Island. Once he had taken enough courses, he transferred. He took the next step and enrolled at the University of Rhode Island. But this incredible story doesn't stop there. As a young man of Hispanic descent who grew up in an urban environment, Eric is following his own path and is majoring in fine arts with a concentration in acting and is one of the very few people of color in the entire department. The next step? Graduation. Eric plans to continue studying his craft at the highly esteemed Actors Studio in New York City.
And we are also being joined in discussion by two members of Muslim Students Association. Amal will join the conversation today with Alice, Eric, and Dr. Zawya. Now, back to Alice.
Thank you, Waleed and Brittany. So in this part, just so you all know, we're going to be moderating a discussion. So I'm briefly going to describe a bit of my origins. I am actually a Kenyan American. I was born here in the US, but I was raised in Kenya. I went to boarding school for 7 years, and I am back here in the US. I did my undergraduate here at the University of Rhode Island, and I am currently in my first year, second semester of graduate school. So, what has served as, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, before I even answer that question, why don't you guys tell us a bit about your own backgrounds, where you're from, how you ended up here?
I'm from the United States.
Okay.
I was born in New York, but I
Okay.
was raised in Rhode Island. And
Cool.
yeah.
What about you?
I'm from Pakistan. I was born in Karachi.
Mhm.
At the age of 13, I moved to the capital, Islamabad, and that's where I'm living right now. I spent a good time traveling with my family around the world, but I'm very well aware of my origins and my culture.
Nice. What about you?
I was born in the Bronx and in New York City, and I spent most of my childhood there and then partially in Providence, Rhode Island.
Interesting. So, how did you guys all end up here at URI?
Well, I was doing dental and in a different school, and then I switched my major to, because they had a really good biotech program here.
Oh.
So I decided to join that. And then I was doing that for a few years, and then it didn't work out that good. So I switched my major, but I'm still a student, and I'm a health studies major now.
Very nice. What about
Well, I graduated from an international school in Islamabad, and when I applied to college, I only applied to the US, mainly because my dad did not want me to go to the UK. So he wanted me to get an American education. I have an older brother who goes to Roger Williams, and he spoke very nicely of Rhode Island. So I applied to URI, especially because the variety of courses you can take here. There's like so many fields you can go into,
Sure.
and I wanted to explore my options before I made a final decision. So that's why I ended up at URI.
Nice. What about you?
Unfortunately, I was arrested in Rhode Island, and I served time in the adult correctional facility here at the ACI, and there was where I took my first college course with the Community of Rhode Island, CCRI,
Okay.
Community College of Rhode Island. And then after I was released, I continued to take courses at CCRI until I had enough credits to transfer over to URI.
Interesting. Well, we all have our very own interesting stories as to how we ended up here. Now, over the past few weeks with the various hosts and crew of the show, we've been talking about racial stereotypes and staying in our comfort zone. And one issue that came up to me was I am not your typical black person, and I don't stay in my comfort zone. And I was wondering if you guys, before I even tell my story, if you guys have a similar story as to how you may be out of your comfort zone, or if you've been racially stereotyped before.
Oh.
Anyone?
Well, that happens all the time to me, like every single day.
Because you wear your hijab?
Yeah, like I'm an American Muslim, so like most people don't, I guess, realize that there's also American Muslims, not just like from other countries. So when they see me, they automatically think I'm like from some Arab country, and you know, I'm not like even Arabic really. And I'm just like American. I'm mixed with like 100 different things probably. And but anyway, people see me, and then like they'll, like, especially if they don't like us or something, and then they'll see me and they're like, hey, you know, you Arab lady, get out of here, this, and they get angry or stuff like that. So it's not just like stereotype, it's like a little, you know, it's all different things, but yeah, I always get stereotyped, but most of the time I get asked where I'm from, so that's a good thing, because it's not just like that stereotype and they're actually asking me.
They're curious.
But they still don't believe me when I tell them
that you're American.
They think that my parents are from, so I'm like, no, really, I'm from here from like way back when, like in 1900 or something.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, like ancestor, like great-grandparents and stuff was from here, came here and stuff, so from all over Europe and different places. But yeah.
What about you guys?
Well, I'm very social, and after coming here, I, just talk to a lot of people and stuff. Yeah, while I agree there is, racial stereotypes to quite a degree, and like sometimes when you talk to people, they, after finding out where you're from, they'll stop talking to you, or they'll like turn around and like kind of like mimic you or something. But for the most part, I guess as human beings, it's our responsibility to just ignore it and look at the people who are actually who don't judge you for such things, or your background and stuff. And I guess that's the people you should just relate yourself to.
Interesting. What about you?
I always chose to live an integrated life. I grew up in the housing projects. My family's from Puerto Rico. I was, like I said, born in New York City. So I always was surrounded by different cultures, ethnicities. So I always made it my duty to reach out to others, and was always introduced. And most of my friends range from different backgrounds and lifestyles. Coming to URI was a great experience, and here as well, I'm able to be open with everyone and meet people from different backgrounds. At the moment, I'm studying a nonviolence peace study minor, and that's also introduced me to another different group of students, and not students who've been through my situation, and but students who also have their own story to tell. And it's just been very interesting and very exciting.
Wow. For me, just a quick wrap up, I usually get the segments of, oh my goodness, you're from Africa, your English is so good, and I know a lot of us go through that, but now we're actually going to send it over to Brittany. Brittany, over to you.
Thank you, Alice. One of the many challenges faced today is discrimination based upon religion and faith. Intolerance and ignorance of different religious groups is a major source of distrust. Let's take a moment to explore what has been done to end religious discrimination, and what are the shortcomings of these measures. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 created federal legislation that prohibits discrimination by employees based upon the religion of an individual. The United States Equal Employment Opportunities Commission states that employees are to accommodate the religious requirements of individuals. Furthermore, harassment based upon religious beliefs is illegal. However, this legislation only protects individuals while they are employed. While newer legislation offers protection from threats, such as cyberbullying, these laws are new, and therefore public awareness about this new legislation can be limited. The law itself is not perfect either. Prejudice in law enforcement is a major problem, giving the power of law enforcement officials to silence victims. In February 2012, the New York Police Department overstepped its jurisdiction to spy on Muslim students associations across Northeast college campuses. Intelligent officers monitored websites, collected information from local police authorities, and in one case, sent an undercover officer on a student trip. According to the Associated Press, while in the student group, the officer made record of the names of the students and even their prayer habits. Ultimately, while legislation can help address instances of discrimination, it cannot end discrimination. Legislation requires that the victim is in a position to take legal action. The individual may be isolated socially or may not be able to afford legal services. The aggressor may have the advantage of power and may be able to threaten the livelihood of the victim. While legislation and policy is an important step in the fight to end discrimination, it must be combined with education to outreach to the population at large. Now that we have some of the basic knowledge, let's get back to the discussion.
Thank you, Brittany. So I'm Catholic. Funny enough, is my dad's Catholic and my mom's Anglican, and you could say I switched to Catholicism by choice when I was 10. So I was just wondering if you guys switched into your religions or grew up in your religions.
Anyway. Well, I grew up like a, I guess, Catholic family.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I was a really like good, I guess, religious teenager and stuff like that. But I always had a lot of questions, and I was never really like satisfied with the answers of them. And even wherever I searched, and I wasn't happy. So eventually, in looking through all different religions, it took some time. But when I came to Islam, I realized that all the questions I had were answered. So I didn't. Like, I was just happy, and I was comfortable there. And I was like, I can't lie to myself. So that's why I'm Muslim now.
Very nice. Yeah. What about you?
Well, I grew up in a Muslim family. Both my parents are Muslims. And despite, like, when I was studying, and, you know, you'd have all these questions about your faith, I studied about Islam, I studied about Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism. And while I find like inspirational figures in all those religions, I chose to follow Islam because that's what, you know, described everything for me. So
it spoke true to you.
Yeah.
Interesting. What about you?
This question is personal, and you know, and I haven't had this question asked to me in a long time. My family is Christian; they're Pentecostal, and I grew up in, you know, with that faith and that religion. But as I was a teenager, in my early teenage years, I was able to reach out to my own things, and I studied different doctrines, and I was excited about different things that I learned. And today I wouldn't claim one religion, and I would just say that I have a way of life that expresses the universe or expresses positivity.
I like. So, on that note, what do you guys think the university can do to improve communication between groups? It could be between religious groups or different student groups. Is there anything you would suggest that the university should do?
Maybe one day they should have some kind of like a thing where there's a lot of students gathered, like maybe in a cafeteria or something like that, and then have some kind of an activity that like helps them to learn about, you know,
the different religions.
Yeah, or something like that, like in the union hall, or, you know, where they come across and they're just coming in, but then they're like, oh, let me stop and see what this is. Right. So, I don't know, maybe just
so
to
sort
see,
of like an awareness, a religious awareness day?
Yeah, like just to know what, like it's there, and it's not like trying to bother no one. It's just kind of like, you know, it's like among you, and like to accept the fact. But on campus it's pretty good. Like, I think most people don't really give, that much hard time,
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So far we've actually had a student perspective, and today we're actually going to be bringing in Dr. Zawya. Brittany's going to tell us more about him. Over to you, Brittany.
The University of Rhode Island knows Dr. Zawya as a man fighting against Alzheimer's disease. His numerous publications in journals such as Molecular Psychiatry, the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, and the Journal of Neuroscience narrate his research on discovering the risk factors in ending this disease, such as Alzheimer's. However, the University of Rhode Island Muslim Student Association knows another side of Dr. Zawya, a side in which he serves as an advisor and a mentor. Today, Dr. Zawya, as the falsities advisor to the Muslim student, will add his perspective, the perspective and falsity of administration, to our ongoing discussion. We will be learning to feel comfortable with other groups. It's a discussion about crossing borders and discovering one's own identity and place in the world.
I'm not in the shop.
Okay, so Dr. Zawya, you're first sitting here. So why don't you tell us a bit about your background and yourself?
Well, first I want to thank you guys for inviting me. It's really quite an honor to be amongst you. The first day I ended up with a job at URI. My first trip was to the Multicultural Center because I'm always looking for that. I have a very both my parents are Muslim. I'm originally from Yemen. I've also lived in East Africa.
Where?
Not in Kenya, but in Ethiopia.
Oh my God.
So I do speak some Ethiopian languages as well. I also speak, English, understand French, and so on. I came here as a student in the 80s and have stayed since. So I can give you the long history of what student organizations were from the perspective of a foreign student that became eventually an American.
That's what I wanted to ask you, actually. I mean, there was a time when you were a student, and now you're a member of faculty. So how do you see things have changed over these all years, especially in terms of religious discrimination towards Muslim students? How do you see these things have changed all over the years? Because you were a student too at the same time. Were you a member of Muslim Student Association?
Well, when I was a student, there were no Muslim student associations. But there was a lot of other, student organizations. I was part of Arab American organizations. And at that time in the 80s, Islam was not the focus. I think the big change happened after 9/11.
After 9/11.
And people became more sensitized and started viewing Islam in a negative way. So before that, I have to say, life was not bad for Muslims, but our lives completely changed after 9/11 on how we're perceived by our friends, the community, our students, other faculty, and that has, it has an effect on you. Once you start becoming comfortable and feeling like an American, then a big event happens and reminds you maybe you're not as American, you're not the common, you're not the average, and therefore you're the other. Over the years, I was struck when I came in, to school in the United States. I went to this cafeteria in a small college where I ended up, that the black students were eating in a separate, table, and the white students were eating at different tables. Today, I still see that when I go to our cafeterias, that after so many years, 30 years or so, black students are eating separately from white students. There are obviously people who are also mixing as well, but I thought that would have be completely, disappeared during my life here, and it has not. I've also taught at historically black colleges and university before I came here. I was a professor at Meharry Medical College, which is the first African-American medical school in this country. From the 1800s, has a very interesting history for another interview. I've taught at other black universities. So I've been in, and of course I went to school at the University of California and the University of Massachusetts. However, I have the perspective, from both sides, being in an environment where the majority are minority, and coming to an environment where the minority are minority.
Interesting. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking with Dr. Zawya from the Kingston campus. And now, to gain another viewpoint of questions and outreach, we're actually going to go to the Providence campus, where we're going to be featuring a live interview with Dr. McCrae, the Vice Provost for Urban Affairs. So, over to you, Providence.
Here with Dr. John H. McCrae, the Vice Provost of the Urban Programs for the continuing College
of Continuing Education.
Yes,
that's right.
yes.
I help you out.
And we're here to interview, ask you a couple questions.
My
How are you doing
pleasure.
today first?
I am absolutely fine.
Okay, well, let's start with the first question. We've heard about the life of students at the Kingston campus. What challenges does a typical Providence student face?
You mean as compared to Kingston students?
Yes.
Oh, well, keep in mind, I'm now Providence, Vice Provost of the Providence campus. I was at one time the Vice President of Student Affairs down at the University of Rhode Island Kingston campus, so I have a pretty good idea of difference there. The differences in the two campuses are primarily highlighted by the fact that at this campus you have a large number of what we call mature or older students. These are usually students who have a family life that is going on where they are either a spouse or a parent of children and have that type of obligations, and therefore their relationship to the campus is different from the relationship that you would find Kingston students, most of the Kingston students, who have a more traditional relationship where in the old days, the campus, the university was in fact the parent of location for many of these students because they were minors. They called it imparente, in other words. So that the university acted as their parents. And to a certain extent, you still have that relationship. But with older students, that's not the case. So what you find when you look at students here in the Providence campus, they have the needs and obligations of most mature people who are working and have a career and a family and their relationship to the campus.
Okay, moving along with two, what programs does the Providence campus offer to assist with balancing the many roles these students have to balance?
Well, some of the programs are consistent with both campuses. You have tutorial programs. You have a library program. You also have a student government which assists in some of those programs. And here we have a very strong peer student program, since many non-traditional students have some problems adjusting to the university. Many of them feel that they've been out of school for a long period of time. They've lost those skills. They have lost the connections that you would have as a traditional student. So we bring in peers who have been successful in this who help them. That's some of the other things.
Okay.
I should also point out we all have centers for smaller children. In fact, we service students from the age of 5 to 80. That's what we tell them. And many of those who are around the age of 5 are usually the children of a lot of our students, the students of our students and children of our students.
Next question. How have the students influenced these programs?
Well, they are the ones who determine what the programs are going to be. We believe that the purpose of the university, in addition to passing on and developing knowledge, is to service the students who are here, service their needs. In our particular case, traditional students have specific needs that we have identified, and they identify for us, which are somewhat different from, as I pointed out before, from the other traditional students. And that requires them to have these mechanisms and organizations where they can converse freely with not only administration but also to the faculty, so that we can make those type of adjustments. One of the important adjustments in the faculty side in terms of the curriculum is that instead of having, say, a 3-hour class 3 days a week, we have our classes, 3-hour classes 1 day a week, which facilitates their schedules, for example. I should also point out that we, as an urban campus, we also interact very much with the urban community around us. And that means that we're going to be primarily a community college in the sense that if you have some needs, we have the urban area around us to satisfy many of those needs. In Kingston, you have to, in fact, import those needs there. So I see here that Christian wants us to wrap up.
Thank you, Dr. McCray, for your time.
Anytime. Glad.
How was that?
Thank you, Dr. McCray. So, a few questions for you guys. What do you think the differences are between being a full-time student versus returning to school after a long period of absence?
I think Eric will answer.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think I've always been a student, whether I came to school or not. I was always in seek of learning and learning knowledge. But coming now to URI, definitely appreciate every opportunity that I get, and everything that I learn, I absorb it a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one question I'd like to ask Dr. Zawya is that Brittany shared some information about how NYPD spies over Muslim student associations all over Northeast campus. They even send, undercover agents to the meetings. What is your response to that? How would you say that is? I mean, is that?
Well, when I heard about that, I was not surprised. After 9/11, I know that everything that we do in our mosques, our centers, and in our organizations has always been spied on. So I'm not very surprised about that. Maybe I'm surprised by the scale and the amount of taxpayers' money that has been wasted on this. Because the bad guys, they don't come to the Muslim Student Association on campus. They don't go to pray where you can find them. It's only the good guys, those who are very, the best of society, people that don't smoke, they don't drink, they don't do drugs. They are the ones who come to, faith-based organizations, to our mosques. So they're spying in the wrong place. And it's just very, very unfortunate. And it's also very unfortunate that they would do that when really they need the Muslim community to help them catch the terrorists and the bad guys. We would be the ones to know who is going to be mixing amongst us and who has any bad, intent for this country that we love and belong to. So if you treat us all as suspects, and there's 6 to 10 million of us inside the United States, or if you act as if 1 billion Muslims in the world might be terrorists, you're doing yourself a huge, huge disservice. You can't defeat, 1 billion people. 99% of them are law-abiding, religious, taking care of their families and taking care of themselves. So I was not very surprised. After 9/11, there were several incidents that involved URI Muslim students. There was a lot of, the Patriot Act, changed a lot of the lives of Muslim students and Muslim Americans, overall. I don't know how much time I have, but you can tell me. We feel the difference as Muslims when we travel and we come back. A lot of Muslims we're taken aside and we have to answer a lot more questions.
In the airport and such.
In the airport and such, right?
Yeah.
We feel the difference. Like if we want to send our family money overseas, it's questioned and it's delayed and it's held up. We feel a difference if we have a large transaction, like we sell our home and we want to deposit a large amount of money in the bank. It's held up somewhere and somebody is really investigating it. So everything we do is always under suspicion, and we've grown accustomed to it, but this is not really the way America should be.
Yeah.
Now, Eric, when you lived in New York City, did you ever encounter anything that can relate to what he was just talking about?
Absolutely. I grew up around a lot of Muslim friends, and I knew what they were going through. And then later on in my life, when I was incarcerated and I went to prison, I was tagged as a felon, and I had that on my record. So everywhere I would go, there would always be a resistance towards that. And as I've dedicated my life to education now here at the university and in the community college, it doesn't change. Even when I apply for a job, I'm still a felon, and then when I go to the bank, I'm still a felon. And it's always a part of a symbol that puts me in a different category. Just
Do you
like
feel
the
like
Muslims.
there's more kind of eyes like constantly judging you, or?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, how does social conflict interact with the different stereotypes around campus or just like in the real world?
See, I would personally like to say that, when we interact with other people, like when we say that we are Muslims, they have an idea and notion in their mind that, oh, this guy might be a terrorist. I mean, I have a friend here on campus. A few days ago, he was driving his car in Massachusetts, and a cop stops him. So he had another friend who was driving with him. So they got their license, and this guy had a Pakistani license. He's from Pakistan. So he showed it to him, and the cop asks him, "You don't have any bombs on you, right?"
Oh, wow.
So see how horrible that is?
Right.
And
That's
I was like,
absurd.
I mean, I'm from Pakistan, and I would be, I would flip out at the
Devastated.
cop. And he said, I just told him, that's a very racist comment for you to make. That's it. He says, oh, then the cop didn't even apologize or anything. He just walked away. That's it. That's fine. So those are the kind of things which worry us, So.
Well, thank you all. Today we're discussing the interactions between various groups. We've shown how ignorance can sour these relations, but we've also shown advocacy and how students can change the world for the better. We've introduced the Muslim students, and they can be contacted at
Thank you for watching today's episode of Dimensions of Diversity. We'll join you next week. Join us next week after the spring break and where we'll talk about women issues. Thank you very much.